Hello, I'm Morgan from Paradise Fibers, and today I'm going to walk you through some of the basic troubleshooting with the Revolution, which is our house-made wheel. And these are just some quick problem-solving ideas for you if you're feeling something, hearing something that sounds funny with your wheel and you're not quite sure. These are some quick solutions for you to try, and you're always welcome to contact us about the wheel if you have any questions or concerns. We're definitely here for you. So this is the Paradise Fiber Revolution, and it's currently set up in double drive. And what happens when you get a squeak? Because that's the number one thing that every spinner always hears somewhere along the line, not necessarily right when you get your wheel and not necessarily any other time. So the first thing that you're going to want to do if you hear a squeak is to start by listening for where it's at, which seems like common sense. But the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to unhook your flyer. So if you're treadling and your flyer is attached and you hear a squeak and you drop it down so your drive band doesn't have any tension and you continue to treadle and the squeak is gone, it means it's somewhere in your flyer, which is common sense, but not necessarily what we think of right away. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to unhook and take your whole flyer mechanism off. And we had the restrictor in, so that way, that's why it was the pop noise that you heard. Okay, so on the flyer, there's a couple different points that you can oil to get rid of a squeak. You're going to want to put a drop of oil on your orifice, either right along here, or you can do it right on the inside if you'd like. And that is one of the points of contact, so that's one of the points where you're going to want some sort of lubrication. The other point is at the very end, where your whirl is going to pop into our maidens, and that's another point of where you're going to get contact, you're going to get noise. But most likely than not, if you're hearing a squeak and it's coming from your flyer, it's probably from your bobbins. And that's because we end up handling our bobbins more than anything else. We take them on, we take them off, we throw them on our cates, we leave them in our bags, we let them roll around in fiber, and all of that takes a little bit of the oil that we need off of our bobbin and makes it so it has a higher likelihood of squeaking. So when you unscrew your whirl, patience is a virtue. So we noticed a problem when we were trying to do this. This is our floor model, and it's the one that is available for anyone to come and touch and play and work with. And it seems like somebody cranked on our whirl, which is why it is now locked in place. The seal is broken, and you can't unscrew it. So there's no way to get this bobbin off, and this is what happens. When you just like reef on your whirls, particularly anything that screws in place. Like, you should never have to force anything on your wheel. If you feel like you're exerting real muscle, you're probably doing something you shouldn't. So I grabbed a second flyer, and I will show you the best ways to take your whirl off. So most people think righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. That's wrong. Wrong for our whirls. Think Bizarro World, totally backwards. You're going to think lefty, tighty, righty, loosey, which is backwards from everything you grew up knowing. But the easy way to feel is it's going to be snug, it's going to be easy to turn off, and if it isn't, stop. So back to the squeak. The most common place you're going to find a squeak is on your bobbin. And so you're going to want to end up oiling the bobbin bearings, because the bobbin bearings, like I said, have the majority of the oil pulled off of them because of how we treat them, where we leave them, things like that. So oil the points on your bobbin, put them back on your flyer, lightly set your whirl. You should be able to start twisting it on with a single finger, like it's no struggle whatsoever. See, it just screws right on super easy. You just want it to feel snug, and then you're good to go. So that is oiling the points on your flare. So if you disconnected your drive band and you treadled and the squeaking stopped, somewhere in the flyer mechanism. If the squeaking continued, it means it's going to be somewhere else. So if your squeaking continued, you have two other major points that it could be squeaking on the revolution. It could be squeaking right here with the Footman, or it could be squeaking at the bottom joints right here. So Footman is a really easy fix. You're going to treadle. It's still squeaking. You're going to stop. You're going to pull the Footman connectors loose, which are really easy. Nothing on the wheel should be forced. It'll slide right out. Second one out. Slide right off. And then you can wiggle right here. And if you wiggle like that and you hear squeaking, then you just need to oil there. And the best way to do that is to pull this out, put a drop of oil on it, let it roll, and just slip it back in. But if you still hear it squeaking, there's a chance that it might be the bearings on the wood. So you just slide this piece out, which is going to take some wiggling because it's been fitted. And you're going to put a little bit of oil right on the face of the wood there, so right lining up with that. And that will lubricate between the wood and the bearings that are on each side of that hole. Then you're going to want to slide it back in place. And sometimes getting these holes lined up can feel kind of tricky, because if you're not perfect, this is not going to fit all the way in. So the best way to do is to take the Footman connector, and this is a really cool trick that our manufacturing came up with, and just, it's tapered, so wiggle and ease until you have it lined up all the way. It should just easily slide in because it's a little bit smaller than this. So once it's all lined up, pull it out, slide it all the way in, and it should feel like you've hit the back. If it's not all the way in. You're going to have this kind of flopping around on you, and your treadle's not going to feel as smooth, and you're more likely to end up having the wood bind up on something, or to feel like there's kind of a trip when you're treadling. Those are all problems because you haven't had this little piece seated all the way to the back. So let's say that when you wiggle this, it doesn't squeak at all. Now you know that it's definitely the two bearings in your Footman binding up. And all you're going to need to do is take your oil, line it up, put a single drop along the crease, and you're good. That's all it's going to take. It's not going to take a ton of oil, just a drop. Anything more than that and you'll have excess oil. In fact, anything that you're going to oil on your wheel is really only going to take a drop. If there's a chance that you're doing more than that, you might even want to take a paper towel and wipe it away. So that is controlling a squeak on a revolution. So I'm going to put our wheel all the way back together, and then I'm going to walk you through a couple of the other problems that you might come across when you're working with your revolution and it's brand new to you. So let me start putting it back together. And putting the Footman back on is a little bit easier if you disconnect the Footman in the back, because then the wheel is not you're not fighting the wheel to try and lift the treadles, which I should have thought of, but whenever you're doing anything with your wheel, just take your time. You're never in a rush. There's no need to hurry. Clicked right in. So let's say you're spinning and you're having some trouble where it feels like your flyer's really struggling. As silly as it sounds, the most likely happened is that your Irish brake is on the wrong side. So for some reason it got swung on this side. And if you look right here, it's blocking the way. So if it did get smooshed down and you tried to shove it in there, you've really created kind of a block for your whole flyer to be working. So it sounds really foolish and like, of course, but it never hurts to double check. There have been plenty of times where I've sat down to spin assuming everything's right, and it's just like, oh, whoosh, blonde moment. So make sure your Irish brake is on the right side. The next thing you want to do is you're going to want to slide it in. And sometimes we have the habit of feeling like everything has to be as close as possible to make it work right. But that's not true. So when you line up your back maiden to be locked into place, it should not be rammed all the way up against your flyer. It's going to bind up on you. It's going to cause problems here, all of your parts of your wheel. It's going to be unpleasant to spin on. So you're always going to want to make sure that you have a little bit of extra play right here. You should be able to see like a sliver of silver before you start spinning, before you lock it down in place. And then you're just going to lock that, which should also be easy if you're struggling. It's too tight. And that might be if you have small children or anything like that, that they thought it was a really cool part to play with. So you have your flyer mechanism back in place. And last but not least, your drive band, which I put our flyer on without paying attention to where my drive band was. So clearly that causes problems with spinning as well. So make sure that when you're in double drive, that your drive band one is on the bobbin and one is on the whirl, the pulleys, whatever you'd prefer to call them, and then tighten it nice and up. So those are some of the basic problems that you're going to come across when you're hearing a squeak or feeling a tremor or anything else like that. And now I'm going to cover a couple of quick things that you feel when you're spinning and you're not quite sure because it's a new wheel. So first things first is if you're in double drive and you're not getting enough take-up, your drive band's not tight enough. It's going to sound absurd, but you're going to need your drive band really tight on the revolution when you're working in double drive. And that's just because of how our wheel is set up and how tensions and ratios work on the whole system. So generally speaking, when I am spinning in double drive, I have it tight enough where you can almost hear it. Like you can hear it ding when you strum your fingers across it. At first I thought this was absurdly tight because I wasn't used to working in double drive, but apparently it's pretty normal and pretty comfortable. And if you feel like you're not getting enough take up yet, and you're in double drive and you're not making like crazy art yarns that could be catching somewhere, or super chunky things where you should be using a bobbin lead to get more power out of each treadle as it is, just tighten it up until you can feel and hear it being really tight. And that's going to take a huge problem out of your take-up when you're in a double drive. And then most people start out with a Scotch tension wheel, which the Revolution also functions as. Right now it's set up so that the Scotch tension isn't active, but when you do, you just unhook. So you can switch to your poly drive band, or you can loosen it a little more. You can double up on your hemp. I wouldn't do it for long periods of time just because the grooves weren't really set up for that thickness, and you can end up damaging your double drive band, but it works for short term. Didn't pack my poly band you know, just trying to demonstrate to someone the differences if you're, you know, demonstrating to people. We have 2 springs on our Scotch tension so that you never have to crank your Scotch tension down tight. So if you have it so that it's like this tight, it's going to be ripping it out of your hands because the 2 springs allow you a lot more sensitive tension. So if it feels like it's ripping out of your hands, your Scotch tension is way too tight. And that's just a happy side effect of having the double springs. So most of the time, it's going to be just tight enough that you can barely visually tell that it's tight. And a lot of spinners learn to feel their Scotch tension, which if you're a new spinner or an old spinner, you might already do. But if it's super stretched out, it's going to be yanking out of your hands. You're going to feel like you have no control of your spinning. So try loosening up your Scotch tension. Last but not least is when your wheel is in bobbin lead. And I'm going to have to switch out wheels real quick. So this is the Revolution when it is in bobbin lead or Irish brake or jumbo version. And clearly, as you can see, it is jumbo, which is one of the coolest things about the Revolution. You can cram a ton of fiber, you can work with really fluffy things, and your bobbins are going to hold as much as you can possibly spin on them. But coming with that comes with some of the difficulties of a bobbin lead flyer. Your wheel has what you could almost interpret as 2 drive bands. You've got one that goes from your wheel to here, and from here to your flyer. And so when you change the speeds, you're going to change it right here. So that's going to change your ratios, give you different speed, different tempo of your spinning. Most people are going to want to be on the biggest because they're working with art yarns or they're plying, and it's usually a lot slower for them, and you have more control. Sometimes fast doesn't always mean control. So just like with the other flyer, you're going to want to make sure that you don't bind up here, so make sure that you have a little bit of wiggle room for your whole piece. If you're jammed all the way up against, you'll get no pull. It will be awful. But the biggest problem that you have when you're in Irish tension is the Irish brake, which is the piece of leather at the top. And this applies force to your flyer to slow it down, which allows it to wind on. And the biggest problem that most people have is they don't realize that their leather can stretch over time, so where you were comfortably putting it is no longer even on the Velcro, as clear with this one. So you might need to just pull off the Velcro, cut a new piece of the catchy end, not the ones with the little hooks, barbs, of the Velcro to adjust it as needed, so you can put more or less tension. The more you want it to pull in, the tighter you want your Irish brake to be, just like with Scotch tension.
Any tension on that leather, by the way. Almost no tension on that.
And you're not going to need as much as you think you are, which is why that's done with Velcro, because Velcro isn't going to let you reef it down. Velcro is going to keep you from ever trying to tighten it so much that you're not going to be able to control your brake. A lot of people, when they're doing really, they want really, really slow take up, won't even have their brake on. But that's a personal preference, and it's based on what you're comfortable spinning with. But like before, you're going to want to make sure that it is at least loose and not underneath your orifice. So this is the Paradise Fibers Revolution, and I'm Morgan. And if you ever have any questions about your wheel, never hesitate to give us a call or send us an email or contact us at paradisefibers.com. I hope you never have any of the problems that we went over, but if you do, never hesitate to ask. And happy spinning!